You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today we're talking with a woman who works right at the intersection of feminism, lesbian and gay rights, and strengthening the Black community. And with a woman who has hit on the real reason women haven't gone into science, tech, engineering, and math. And she's hit on what to do about it. Last, we'll hear from a feminist musicologist who spans Hildegard von Bingen's work and the Hollywood Redheads all-girl band. She's the foremost of her kind in the world. Honest. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. A federal advisory panel has recommended that the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, approve the first drug to treat a lack of sexual desire in otherwise healthy women. And there are a few women's groups that are hailing this as a big breakthrough in gender equality and stuff, because men, of course, have Viagra and so forth. But the panel's recommendations were laced with so many caveats that most women's groups say that it seems clear this particular drug, flibanserin or flibanserin, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, is only marginally effective and carries serious adverse effects, or at least the risk of them. The drug is made by Sprout Pharmaceuticals of Raleigh, North Carolina, and it changes the levels of three chemicals in the brain. The brain! Viagra doesn't work on the brain. Cialis doesn't work on the brain. Changes the levels of three chemicals in the brain in ways that are supposed to increase the sex drive of premenopausal women who suffer from a loss of libido. The drug has been rejected twice by the FDA. In 2010, after an earlier advisory committee recommended unanimously against approval, and in 2013, when the agency said that Sprout would have to perform more studies to show that the benefits outweigh the risks. And the benefits, women who took flibanserin, for example, reported having one more sexually satisfying event per month than women who got a placebo. But the potential side effects included low blood pressure, fainting, dizziness, and sleepiness, which could cause accidents. The long-term health risks, largely unknown. Because why? Because the clinical studies were rushed to get this out. They were too short to estimate long-term risks. A study in mice suggested that flibanserin may increase the risk of breast cancer. But that would have to be monitored over time. And potential interactions between the drug and alcohol or other drugs are believed to amplify the adverse effects. A small study of the interaction between alcohol and flibanserin in 25 moderate drinkers found that 4 suffered severe side effects requiring medical intervention. Now, sit down for this next sentence. Unbelievably, 23 of the 25 subjects were male, and only 2 were female. So the study did not clearly characterize the risks to women. Oh my God. The advisory committee's recommendation was applauded by Even the Score, which is a coalition of women's groups and other organizations like the National Consumers League, who wants you to buy. So Even the Score applauded the recommendation, and Even the Score is supported by Sprout. But the move was deplored by the National Women's Health Network, which complained that Sprout had not provided enough data for women to make an informed decision. But here's inside the headlines, a little news note. Last July, about a year ago, at a chic restaurant in Washington, D.C., 2 feminist lobbyists, Susan Scanlon and Audrey Shepard, who had worked on so-called women's issues for years on the Hill, lobbying, were at a private party for Cindy Whitehead, who is a senior executive at Sprout. Dum-da-dum-dum. They had a common cause, getting the drug approved, and the women, together with a public relations company, Blue Engine Message and Media, are still central players. Our bodies ourselves, the National Women's Health Network, have all denounced the approval of the pill, which hasn't taken place formally yet. But interestingly, Susan Wood, director of the Jacobs Institute of Women's Health at George Washington University, said, quote, "From my perspective, their strategy, which has been a real campaign, is extremely inappropriate." In other words, they based their strategy on it was unfair and sexist that men had Viagra and women didn't have a comparable medication, and so that's why this should be rushed through tests and trials. She said, Wood, that is, said that the company had made the rounds asking for the support of women's health organizations, but that she had not kicked in her approval because there are important issues around ensuring that women get studied and that women's health needs are addressed, but this trivializes the work. The drug company, Sprout Pharmaceuticals, was formed by Ms. Whitehead, member from the luncheon, and her husband, Robert Whitehead, after the company that previously owned flibanserin gave up on it when the FDA first unanimously rejected it. And it claims to be a very feminist company, although other than Ms. Whitehead, one of the owners, the company's board of directors is entirely male. And the Whitehead's previous enterprise, Slate Pharmaceuticals, sold an implantable testosterone pellet for men. In 2010, it received a warning letter from the FDA saying the company was promoting unapproved use of its treatment, overstating its effectiveness and minimizing its side effects. On the other hand, women are not just small men. Women's bodies are complicated, and we are in an age of gender-specific medicine. Or let's put it the other way. Women's bodies are normal. Men's bodies are simplistic. In any event, Ms. Scanlon flew into the breach saying this was inequity, this is outrageous, and they pressured the FDA on the grounds of feminism. Daniel Carpenter, a scholar of regulatory policy at Harvard, called the campaign for approval the most extreme case of companies using social lobbying to get a drug approved in years. Back off, Sprout. You're not to use the feminist movement and women's health as a selling point for something that might be dangerous to both. And now it's time for our first guest. Monica Ray Simpson is a native of North Carolina. She's now the interim executive director of Sister Song, which is a collective of 80 local, regional, and national grassroots organizations that represent the voices of Indigenous women and women of color, ensuring reproductive justice through human rights. She is a founder of Charlotte's first Black Gay Pride celebration in North Carolina and Charlotte's African American Giving Circle. Monica, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I've wanted to get you on for some time to talk about Sister Song,
Yes.
which is one of the now grown-up, mature ladies of the women's movement. Was founded in 1997, and you're a founder of many other organizations, and I want to talk about those. But you are the executive director of Sister Song. So start with telling us about Sister Song.
Yes, Sister Song. I feel so honored, right, to be in this role because I was one of those young activists that really looked up to the leadership of Sister Song and my predecessor, Loretta Ross, as just kind of being these beacons of light, you know, in this work. And so I was introduced to Sister Song and the reproductive justice framework in 2007 when I attended the U.S. Social Forum. And at the time, I was doing work around abolishing for-profit private prisons and immigrant detention centers. And before that, doing kind of work around LGBTQ equality. And at every point, I kind of felt like in my activist journey that at some point I had to check some piece of my identity at the door, right?
Yep.
It's like if I was doing work, you know, around LGBTQ equality, my Blackness wasn't really something that was on the table for discussion at that time. And if I was doing work around the prison industrial complex, we weren't really talking about how LGBTQ equality was like an integral part of that too. But being introduced to reproductive justice and this framework of intersectionality, right, that really talks about how multiple layers of oppression and also multiple identities are present in all of us all the time.
Right.
And it just hits on that, that phrase from Audre Lorde, like none of us live single issue lives. And so this framework that Sister Song pioneered really, because we debuted the reproductive justice framework at our first national conference, has really shifted the way that we talk about reproductive health and rights in this country, to not just to focus on the singular issue of abortion, but to talk about the right to have children and the human right, that is, to also parent those children in healthy and sustainable environments. And it talks about, living self-determined lives, right? About not being able to, moving exploitation out of the way, moving reproductive oppression out of the way so that folks are able to do that. And so that's really what Sister Song works to do, is to hold this framework. We're a national collective of all women of color in this country, holding this framework and working from that.
It's so important, and it's also so important and brilliant. This goes back a ways to its founding, which I, having come from the age of dinosaurs, remember. But that it is rooted. It's reproductive justice rooted in human rights, because I think that the great flaw of Roe v. Wade, and I know why that we were trapped in making this mistake, was that we came in under privacy instead of under human rights. We came in under privacy because that was the only way we could get it. But it is because of that reproductive rights is still a political football. If it had come in under human rights, the issue would have been, locked at that point, and we would, in law, and we wouldn't have to be refighting this again and again and again and again. And that's just abortion. The other areas the other issues which you raise, which in fact are imperative, the right to have a child, the right to have a child under decent and sane and supportive conditions, all of that, the right not to be experimented on, the right not to have forced abortions, the right, every aspect of it, which we were chanting in the early 70s even. It was free abortion on demand. Yeah, right. Don't hold your breath. Free abortion on demand and no forced sterilization. They were all one slogan.
That's right.
But that somehow got lost in the process. And since Roe came in under privacy and not human rights, therein lay the political football that it has become ever since. Whereas to root this in human rights where it belongs not only makes it more solid, but also organically interlinks all those other issues about reproductive rights,
Absolutely.
So this is extremely important, and it is, I think, a model, or should be a model, for the approach to reproductive rights for the entire women's movement.
We absolutely agree. And we're seeing that it's getting traction, right? Like we see reproductive justice now, like in the titles of articles. There was one on The Nation that was written by Danny McClain on reproductive justice. And we're seeing that folks are starting to understand, the importance of, talking about how, social justice issues also impact the reproductive lives of folks. So we are starting to see a shift happen. And I'm glad, because I do agree with everything that you just said, like really I felt like, those, the movements that we look to now as like a part of our history, they were really focused in on those single issue, it was a single issue position, right? And because we wanted to get that win.
Right.
But what we're seeing with reproductive justice is that, like my liberation depends upon your liberation, right? And so once, we really see that interlinking of all of us together, and realizing that when we keep the most marginalized centered and we work on securing freedom and liberation for that group, then it automatically impacts us all.
Right.
Right. So, yeah.
Right. Well, and another line of Audrey's, goddess rest her soul, is something like, I don't want to parse it wrongly, but it's something like, I sometimes wonder which one of me will survive all these liberations, you know,
Yes,
because she
yes,
she
yes.
always used to identify herself with a string of adjectives: warrior woman, lesbian mother, feminist,
Hmm.
poet, activist, and it went on and on. And she insisted on every one of them. And oh
Yes,
God, we miss her a lot. You
yes.
have been in a similar position of having to survive all these liberations because
Mm,
you came out as a same gender loving woman while attending college. You were a baby. Um,
yeah.
but you were hired as the first person of color, male or female,
Hmm.
at the Lesbian
Yeah.
and Gay Community Center in Charlotte. That must have been a trip.
It was a big trip. On one hand, I was extremely excited. I thought that I had like landed the dream of my life had just come true, right? I had just came out, on my college campus, and I went to a historically black university. And so this wasn't like I was coming out on Smith or,
Yeah,
one of those college campuses that are kind of like more liberal in the way that they do their work. And
right.
not to say that those folks on those campuses don't still encounter issues, but it was really challenging in 1999 whenever I was on this black college campus trying to come out. And,
Wow.
I mean, folks were getting death threats slid under their door. And,
Oh,
young gay guys are getting beat up by football players on our campus. And so that's what really propelled us and really moved us towards action. And I don't know if it was because of the rage or the fear, but either one of them, right? It really moved us towards saying that we need to be protected. We need to make sure that our voices are heard on this campus
yep.
and that that our rights are secure too. And so then next thing I know, I'm a student activist. I did not know what that really meant until then, but that's what really started this journey. And so I was, volunteering with the community center because I needed that safe space,
Right.
in the city. And they hired me on, and it was really interesting. I was very young, and I was very black, in this community center.
Hopefully you still are.
Yeah, I am. I'm definitely still very black, but even though I was really excited to be in a space where I could like really spread my wings and feel very safe as a queer person, this term I've now kind of embraced in this activist world, me being a black woman in that space is where it became the most challenging, right? And that's when I really realized that even though that I was in this group, of marginalized folks, and racism and ageism, right, was still such a huge issue, right?
Sure.
And so I wish I would have understood or knew like how to articulate intersectionality then,
Right.
but it was just a part of my journey. But yeah, that's when my eyes really started to open up to like, oh, it's not just about me being queer. It's also about, how do they accept me when I walk into this room as black woman and as young, woman walking into the room as well. So
Right,
it was
right,
very
Yeah,
eye-opening.
but without the tools that are now available, you went ahead anyway, and I mean that definitely wins the Plucky Wench of the Week award. I mean, you were a hell of a brave kid to just you invented it at the wheel as you went, not knowing that there were wheels. I love that kid that you were. I just love her. Listen,
Well, thank you.
we're almost out of time. Give the website of Sister Song for people who don't know about it or want to find out more or contact it or support it. Be sure to tell them how.
Absolutely. So our website is www.sistersong.net. Again, www.sistersong.net. We're going through a beautiful transition on our page, but you'll find amazing information and the way to get in contact with us. We're focusing in on building Southern Synergy as a national-based or a national Southern-based organization as we are here in Atlanta, Georgia, and our role in Southern movement building. We're lifting up issues to an international stage. We're really trying to make that global sisterhood happen. And then we're also looking at how do we strategically use arts and culture as a way to, as a tool in movement building, because I'm also an artist, right? So I feel like Audre Lorde in a lot of ways. And so I'm a singer-songwriter. And so the power of music, of art, of poetry, spoken word, like in movement building. It's just, I mean, it's powerful that we can see that, you know, through many, many movements. And so as a reproductive justice movement, when we are talking about our families, our bodies, our lives, what tools, what art are we creating to really move that forward? And so as a national collective, we're working with artists all across the country to create those replicable models, and to talk about how we do that well. So we're really excited about the work that we do.
That's crucial, because art goes places in the human spirit that nothing else goes there, you know, and reaches people more deeply than any rhetoric or propaganda or anything else. Well, you're terrific, and I've known all along that Sister Song is terrific, but they're lucky to have you. And thank you so much, Monica, for being with us. Thank you for the work that you do, and you come back and talk to us again. Promise?
I promise to do that. I cannot wait to make it happen.
It's time for another short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I remember, do you, when they used to say, well, where are your great women composers? There are none. Ha ha ha. Well, the woman we're about to talk with in our next segment knows differently and has proven differently across centuries and centuries of study.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Did you know that there was a full-length opera written by a woman composer, a Black Creek Indian woman, about the Underground Railway that helped escaping enslaved peoples during the Civil War? Well, our next guest knows all about that and much more. Probably the foremost feminist musicologist of our time, maybe ever, Jeannie Gayle Poole. Dr. Jeannie Gayle Poole, Jeannie for short, welcome to the program. Good to have you here.
Thank you so much.
I don't know where to begin. I mean, you are fantastic. You are a Renaissance woman, a composer, a musicologist, a producer, a book writer. Wow! You are the person who, for more than 3 decades, has been the foremost organizer and advocate of women in classical music. Yay! From the first International Congress on Women in Music in New York in 1979, straight throughout the Hildegard Festival of Women in the Arts recently at CSU Stanislaus. So it's hard to classify you because of your many talents, but one place to start is with the documentary film and biography, and then subsequently a book that you did, of the all-women's band leader Peggy Gilbert. So talk a little bit about that.
Oh, Peggy was absolutely amazing. She lived to be 102. And Lily Tomlin asked me to make a documentary on Peggy's life after seeing a group of photographs I showed at Peggy's 100th birthday party.
Wow.
And Lily said, I will help you make this film. It's really important. Because Peggy's friends had not seen photographs of her early life on vaudeville. She had an all-girl band in the 20s and toured as the backup group for Rudy Weedoff in a group called Saxophobia. And
oh, God.
It was just so much fun. And Peggy, her secret to long life was, first of all, to be of service to other musicians and women. She networked women musicians her entire life and hired them, and even in her 90s was appearing on television in The Golden Girls and The Ellen Show, and it reinvented herself, became a member of SAG, and in her 90s doing commercials, and such an inspiration to all of us to see that every decade she reinvented herself, picked herself up, and kept going.
How amazing. And I'm so glad that Lily pressured you to do the documentary and was part of it. Lily is a friend, a dear friend of mine and of this program, and has been on it many times, so I'll be sure to alert her that now one of her, as it were, proteges ironically, has also been a guest. The another of your amazing accomplishments is that you brought attention to the Black Creek Indian composer Zenobia Powell Perry, who until then her work was just simply invisible, unrecognized in the mainstream. And you spent how long reconstructing Perry's opera, Tawawa House?
Well, I worked about a year and a half doing the restoration and reorchestration of the opera for performances that took place last May in Modesto, California, at the Townsend Opera Company. And it was a huge undertaking. Tawawa House is about the Underground Railroad stop that eventually became Wilberforce University in Ohio, one of the oldest African-American owned and managed, operated university in the country. And it started out as a resort hotel to serve the needs of white Southern gentlemen and their black mistresses and their mixed-race offspring.
Wow.
Perfect foil for the Underground Railroad, because no one knew exactly who was a slave and who was free.
Of course.
It's an extraordinary story, and it's based on the spirituals. There are a lot of spirituals in the show, and it's a very positive image of African Americans. Most of the cast make their living singing Porgy and Bess on the road around the world. And they said they were so pleased to do an opera that had positive role models of African Americans, and particularly a strong female central character.
It's a perfect subject for an opera, too. I mean, it's almost naturally operatic. Is there any possibility of getting it on tour or in other opera houses around the country?
Well, I have a few
and the world, for that matter.
At it, but the problem is just getting the word out about it. Spirituals have taken they're not so welcome in the community because many people believe the spirituals represent slave culture in America.
They're rebellion songs and about crossing to the other side, not necessarily heaven, but the other side of the border.
Right, and explicit instructions about how to head north.
Yes.
And how to avoid trouble and where to go. And they're pretty amazing when they're put in that context. And the performances were so moving, and the audience cried with me.
You also, it's such a gift that you gave us in finding and reviving that work. And so let's all be on the lookout for it and spread the word, listeners, because it really is fantastic. It was it's called Tawawa House, Tawawa.
And Zenobia Powell Perry.
Yes.
And I knew her for about 30 years. It was a great privilege. But she lived in poverty in the end of her life because she was an underpaid junior faculty member at a black college because she was a female.
Oh,
and
God.
She had no income practically to live on in her senior years. Could not afford to photocopy the music and send it to people and so they could see it. And it was just very difficult to see that because that is the case for a lot of elderly African-American faculty members who worked at traditionally African-American colleges in this country.
In between doing that and doing all the books, including the book about that, Peggy Gilbert and her all-girl band was one book. American composer Zenobia Powell Perry, Race and Gender in the 20th Century was another. And The Passions of Musical Women, the story of the International Congress on Women in Music. And this is interesting to me also because you helped to establish the board of the International Alliance for Women in Music. How did that come about? And you still, I think, serve on the board or a member?
Right, I'm an advisor to the board. Actually, I started my research on women in classical music in about 1973 as an undergraduate student at Hunter College. And I could see instantly that there had to be some efforts made because we were looking at music history textbooks with no women composers mentioned in the books.
Right.
Only a footnote for Clara Schumann, the wife of Robert Schumann.
Right.
And so I started the advocacy back then, and in the 70s started producing concerts and late 70s festivals, and then the big International Congress on Women in Music in 81. And I helped merge all three women composer organizations into one umbrella, but it took us about 12 years to do it.
And one last quick thing, because we're beginning to run out of time, but talk just for a minute about the biography that you're currently writing of Babe Egan and the EGAN Egan, who also had an all-girl band on vaudeville called the Hollywood Redheads.
The Hollywood Redheads, they were the inspiration for Peggy Gilbert's band. Recently found a recording of the band from Germany, 10 sides from 1932, and discovered that the band was really first-rate, wonderful musical organization, and decided, I'm just going to have to finish this book. They were big time in vaudeville, but vaudeville history is a difficult thing in American music because it's always dismissed as being
right.
Not very interesting and kitsch culture, but in fact, most of our contemporary entertainment industry is built on vaudeville.
On vaudeville. Well, nothing seems to stop you. I mean, from the classical music to film music to vaudeville music, as long as it's music, and unearthing these remarkable women and buried herstories, as it were, is a real gift to all of us. Thank you again for all that you do, and thank you also for all you will do, and for being with us today on Women's Media Center Live. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Ooh. You knew I couldn't resist this. This was the Nobel Prize laureate who was forced to resign as honorary professor at University College London, and who was bumped from the Royal Society of Scientists after saying that female scientists should be segregated from male colleagues because women cry when criticized and are a romantic distraction in the laboratory, as he would have pronounced it. Tim Hunt, 72, a biochemist who got the Nobel in physiology or medicine in 2001 for groundbreaking work on cell division. He just really wore his foot in his mouth. He said, "Let me tell you my trouble with girls." He said this to an audience at the World Conference of Science Journalists in South Korea. 3 things, he went on, happen when they are in the lab, girls, that is. 1, you fall in love with them. They fall in love with you. And when you criticize them, they cry. Well, there was a stony silence from the audience and a lot of anger and a global backlash. And some of the remarks from women scientists are just absolutely wonderful on Twitter and elsewhere. Dr. Connie St. Louis, director of the Science Journalism Program at City University London, wrote, "Really, does this Nobel laureate think we're still in Victorian times?" And others joined in. Professor Sophie Scott of University College London, who researches the neuroscience of voices and speech, wrote on Twitter, "I'm in the office, but I cannot do my science work as I saw a photograph of Tim Hunt, and now I'm in love, damn it." And Kate Devlin, a lecturer at Goldsmiths, University of London, added in Twitter, "Dear department, please note I will be unable to chair the 10 a.m. meeting this morning because I am too busy swooning and crying." Some men, fortunately, responded also. A theoretical physicist in Chicago, Robert McNeese, said the 2015 Nobel Prize in being a clueless, sexist jerk goes to Tim Hunt, probably not his last. He issued one of those, non-apology apologies. If somebody was offended, if somebody was hurt, why then he was really sorry. But He went on to say two contradictory things. He said his comments were meant to be ironic and lighthearted, but had been interpreted too seriously. On the other hand, he said, I did mean the part about having trouble with girls. I have fallen in love with people in the lab, and people in the lab have fallen in love with me, and it's very disruptive to the science because it's terribly important that in a lab people are on a level playing field. And it's terribly important you can criticize people's ideas. And if they burst into tears, it means you tend to hold back and from getting at the truth, and science is about nothing but getting at the truth. Well, let's have some truth here. A Yale study published in 2012 showed that science professors at American universities widely regarded female undergraduates as less competent than male students with the same skills and accomplishments. And they were less prone to mentor female students or to offer them a job. And when presented with two imaginary applicants with identical accomplishments and qualifications, they would choose the man. And if the woman was chosen, she was offered a salary, on average $4,000 lower than that offered to the man. You also, of course, will remember in 2006, Lawrence Summers' infamous statement about women lacking an intrinsic aptitude toward mathematics. So it's happened again, and it's fascinating and very dispiriting when it happens with scientists who supposedly are about getting at the truth. But it's all the more reason to put it right in the surrealism corner, and to stay tuned, because in our next segment we talk with a woman who knows a lot about science and technology and why women don't go into those fields, only one element of which is guys like Tim Hunt. It's time to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll return in just a moment with a discussion with a woman who knows the real reason why women don't go into engineering and other STEM sciences, and knows what to do about it. Do not go away. Stay with us.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back to a real scientific breakthrough. Not so much a scientific breakthrough in science, but about science, one that will transform science and engineering and the other STEM disciplines profoundly. Lina Nilsson, Nilsson, is a woman who has a PhD in biomedical engineering, and she is the innovation director at the Bloom Center for Developing Economies at the University of California at Berkeley, and she has uncovered a major finding. Welcome to the program, Lina.
Thanks for having me, Robin.
Well, I was blown away by this op-ed that you did for the New York Times toward the end of April. You can probably still get it online, listeners. It was called How to Attract Female Engineers. It was April 27th, 2015. And in it, as someone who herself has a degree in biomedical engineering, you sort of went through the things that we all, as feminists, and certainly on this program quite a lot, wring our hands about. That at Apple, 20% of tech jobs are held by women. At Google, only 17%. Nationwide, about 14% of engineers in the workforce are women. And then you also talked about the different reasons that have been offered, which we all know about. I mean, workplace sexism, the lack of role models, stereotypes against women, and the proposed fixes that are mentor programs and student support groups and so forth. But it's not moving fast. It certainly isn't moving fast enough. And you have come up with a solution that is indeed much simpler and already obvious once you wrote about it. And then I thought, the nose on my face, oh my God. Which is that if the content of the work itself is more socially meaningful, women enroll in droves. Tell us about this.
That's right. So we started a new program here at the Blum Center for Developing Economies at UC Berkeley. So it's a center that goes all across engineering. And the program we started is all about creating engineering solutions that serve society and that serve the world's poor. And in that program, without in any way trying to target females, we achieved 50% female enrollment. And as a comparison, enrollment nationwide in engineering at the undergraduate and the PhD level is about 20% women.
Wow, wow.
So we doubled it.
You're on to something big here, because you also pointed out in the op-ed that at the Interdisciplinary D Lab at MIT, which has a focus on developing technologies to improve the lives of poor people, 74% of the students this past year were women.
That's right. And in fact, every one of the about dozen or more universities that we contacted that had programs that were similar saw the same trends.
University of Minnesota, Pennsylvania State, Santa Clara, Arizona. This is, I think, awfully good news for science and certainly for women, because it shows us that we're not the problem.
That's right. But I think it's a really important point that it's also important for science and for engineering and society. This is not just about gender equity, and I think that was a point that resonated in the article with a lot of people. The fact that engineering is about solving the problems in society, and you can only solve problems that you understand and that you can see. And so we need a diversity of people being engineers and deciding what are the important problems.
Well, it's also, as you pointed out, about reframing the goals of engineering research and the curriculums accordingly to be more relevant to societal needs. And God knows society needs,
Yeah.
I mean, the planet itself is at an imperiled state. How did you come up with this? Did you sort of always know and intuit it, or did you fall on it sideways and realize there it is?
It was unplanned, and I didn't know it until I first noticed it here at Berkeley, and then started calling around and saying, "Whoa, this is consistently true everywhere." I'm talking to other universities. So I think that's part what's so powerful about it, is that it's not just some sort of tweak we did just to get women in the door. It's intrinsic and natural to this form of engineering. And I believe that similar things could be done across all of the engineering fields, chemical, biomedical, environmental, that we could really highlight the societal benefits and components of all these different fields.
Are there studies being done at all, or gathering of statistics about other fields, math, technology, well, that's engineering, medicine, etc.?
Yes, there's lots of studies and lots of interest. So I think both at universities and at a lot of tech companies and engineering companies. So I hope this is another wave of interest and actual action.
I'm trying to figure out how to frame this question, because I'm thinking out loud here. Why do you think this is the case? That women are raised to be more altruistic, that women are socialized that way, that we have more oxytocin capacity because of our estrogen, that we. I mean, what do you think is behind this?
I don't know, and I think there are many different reasons that people are throwing out, whether it's nature or nurture, right? And even if it's about the caring or the impact, I mean, one thing for me that's been really interesting is that I've been doing this for quite a while, and no one ever called it caring until we called out that women were doing it. And now it's caring, and I think that before we were saying it's impactful and it's breakthrough technologies for society, and the vocabulary changed once I said women in some conversations. So I'm a little hesitant to call it this analogies to caring, and in part, it's not directly working with people day to day.
Right.
It's a bit abstract compared to that. So I think there might be something bigger going on that encompasses some of the things you said, but also other dimensions.
Well, I could see the caring bit being used against us. Oh well, yes.
Right.
Well, all the more reason women shouldn't be in science and technology, because they care how it's used. They would prefer for it, I don't know, not to be used in a sort of Nazi way, and instead to be meaningful work that helps humanity.
Right.
And that,
but I'd like to keep that vocabulary: impactful, breakthrough, impact,
yes,
inclusive. We can still keep those terms.
Yes, I
even
think
now
you're
that
right.
It's women.
I think you're right. I think this is absolutely extraordinary, and I mean, it's sort of the old breakdown. I would love for there to be studies on this study, in effect, because it's like the old breakdown: boys and their toys, whereas girls liked stories.
Right.
Narrative, dialogue, people who are, involved in some way, a human connection. You see it in the popularity of, quote, chick flicks as opposed to what I call prick flicks, with lots of technology and bang bangs. But you sort of see it across the field. So in one sense, it's an old stereotype, and I'm always wary of those being used against us. But in this case, it is so, whatever language is used about it, it is so unavoidably good for science.
That's right.
That I can't see how the boys can get upset about it. But that's famous last words.
Yeah, no, I totally completely agree, and we have had a lot of positive comments, definitely, about the large-scale benefits that this could have, not just for women, but in this much broader sense.
And those have been coming from men as well as women, I hope.
Yes, yes.
Have you had a lot of pushback, or much?
There has been some pushback, and some, I guess, may be interesting from the pushback, sometimes also from women, based on a misunderstanding that this is somehow pink engineering, or putting females in their own box separate, and it's less serious than the men. But these are quite serious projects. I mean, it's still building bridges and creating medical technologies and very traditional engineering projects at their engineering core. At the how, it's just that the why has shifted.
Exactly. And this expands the why of why women supposedly always went into the, quote, soft, unquote, sciences. Sociology and psychology, and stuff that had to do with all those feelings. So I see why you're leery of the word caring, but I think it's such an up for the human species. It's quite marvelous. You're the innovation director, which itself is a great term, for the Blum Center for Developing Economies at University of California. Is there a website or something on the study that you've done and on the op-ed, and are you writing a book? How can people learn more about this?
Well, one thing we're doing, one big next step, is a diversity summit about the importance of diversity in social innovation, whether it's in engineering or in the social sciences or humanities. What does that mean for 21st century education to also have diversity and participation? We are certainly collecting a lot of stories and a lot of other data that I wasn't aware of before. So I hope that this story is going to continue. Thank you
for this. Thank you for the op-ed, Lina, and thanks for being with us on Women's Media Center Live.
Yeah, thank you, Robin.
It's time for one last break here. I'm Robin Morgan. We're at Women's Media Center Live, and I will be right back with some fighting words.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again in time for some fighting words. Since Israel is always being trumpeted as being so progressive and the only democratic existing state in a tyrannical region, and so wonderful especially for women, who of course are draftable and serve in the Israeli army and serve in all posts, I thought I would throw a few fighting words in their direction because of a very interesting op-ed piece that was written by an Israeli, Merev Zonstein, that appeared in the New York Times on June 14th. She knew that Israeli law required that all abortions be approved by a committee, which I had personally forgotten. But she also knew the procedure was widely accessible, and so when she found herself 6 weeks pregnant and already had a 5-month-old baby at home, she went to her OBGYN, and he provided her with an ultrasound as proof, and said, I don't do abortions. The committees deal with them. You can call this number. So she wrote that each committee includes a social worker and 2 doctors, and the law stipulates 4 criteria, any of which is sufficient for approval. 1, if the woman is below 18 or above 40 years old. 2, if the fetus is in danger. 3, if the woman's mental or physical health is at risk. And 4, if the pregnancy occurs out of wedlock or is the result of rape or incest. So since Merev Zonzain was 33 and free of medical issues, she thought that she and her partner, not being legally married, she would have a clear ticket out. But she began to really get angry that the decision was not hers totally, that she had to request permission. So the Pregnancy Termination Committee at the hospital near her operates only for a few hours, twice a week. And she waited and waited and waited to register. Her request was, in fact, granted. There were no medical questions or examinations, and there were also no offers of information or assistance. As she says, it was cold, efficient bureaucracy. But women who don't fit the official criteria, as she did, go through a more grueling, protracted process in which they're questioned a lot and at times even pressured not to go through with it. Because in Israel, social attitudes toward terminacy of an unwanted pregnancy vary depending on which religious or ethnic community you come from or live in. Abortion became legal in Israel in 1977, 4 years after Roe, but the law doesn't recognize a woman's right to make her own choice. Amazing. And terminating pregnancies is considered counterintuitive to Zionism, which requires a booming Jewish birth rate, which you find in the Orthodox community, having women being forced to have as many children as, in fact, fundamentalist communities in Islam force Palestinian women to have lots and lots of babies, trying to outbirth each other. But interestingly, the most recent figures show that in practice, although 98% of abortion requests in Israel are approved, of the approximately 40,000 abortions performed each year, only half go through the committees. What happens to the other 20,000? They're conducted illegally through doctors at private clinics. Not at home, not in alleyways. There are lots of doctors that people can find online at the click of a button. And they're theoretically subject to punitive measures legally, but their patients are not, and the authorities just look the other way. A 2014 reform to the National Health Coverage Law offers free abortions to all women between 20 and 33, regardless of circumstances. And a bill proposed in 2006 by the left-wing Meretz party sought to get rid of the committees entirely, but it was rejected, so the committees are still there and functioning. And so it's interesting because even she, as an Israeli, says often when faced with criticism of Israel's human rights record, its leaders and supporters like to boast about the progressive credentials of Israel, its free press, its gay rights community, and its increasing number of women serving in combat. But she says you don't often hear much about its abortion policy, and now she knows why. Indeed, you can be drafted and you can fight and die for your country, but you cannot still control your own reproductive rights. Mazel tov. And that's it for today. The last straw this week was Jeb Bush's foot-in-the-mouth disease problem, his attempt to squirm out of having written in 1995 that we had so many unwed mothers in the United States, proper name is single moms, because the culture had stopped, quote, shaming, close quote, such behavior. Oh my God. Jeb should be forced to memorize Hawthorne's great novel, The Scarlet Letter, and recite parts of it aloud, especially quoting Chillingworth, at every stump speech. Huh. This program is syndicated, but if you can't find the broadcast on a radio station in your area, you can always visit us at WMClive.com, and there you can find the show, plus the archive of all our previous episodes, and at iTunes worldwide. You can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Also, be sure to find WMC Live on Facebook and Twitter. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Opinions expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton, Senior Producer, Crystal Williams-Chancellor, and our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Don't forget to join us next week, right here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.